I never thought silence could have a sound until that Christmas night. The house was quiet, almost sacred in its emptiness. Every tick of the clock felt like a reminder that time hadn't stopped for my grief, even if my heart had. Outside, the snow had turned the world into a white stillness, and inside, only the low hum of the old radio kept me company. It hadn't worked properly for years. Maybe, in some way, it reflected me, full of static, flickering with memories I didn't know how to tune anymore. It was my first Christmas without Stacy. 67 years of life, and yet I had never known what real loneliness meant until I sat by that cold fireplace, staring at her photograph above the mantel. She was smiling in that picture, that soft, knowing smile that once made everything feel right. The kind of smile that could quiet storms inside me. Now, all I had were echoes, her voice in my head, her handwriting in the margins of old letters, the faint scent of her perfume still hiding in the closet like a ghost refusing to leave. I had promised her I'd be okay. I said those words at the hospital, my hands shaking around hers, pretending I believed them. But promises are strange things, they sound strong when spoken, yet fragile when silence takes over. The truth was, I wasn't okay. I was just waiting. For what? I didn't know. The radio sat there, dusty and forgotten, a relic of my younger years. Stacy had loved it. She used to sing along to carols every December, her voice blending with static and laughter. I remember once she said, "One day, Peter, when I'm gone, you'll still hear me in the music." I laughed then. But on that night, as the wind howled outside, something inside me began to ache with that memory. I turned the dial, half hoping for noise, half wishing for silence. And then, it happened. A sudden crackle, a hiss of static, followed by a soft, familiar melody. Silent night. My breath caught in my throat. And right after the first verse, I heard her. Stacy's voice. Clear. Warm. Alive. I froze. My heart stopped beating for a moment that felt like eternity. The room seemed to shrink around me as her voice spoke, not singing now, but speaking, softly, like she was right beside me. Peter, if you can hear me, don't be afraid. The mug in my hand slipped and shattered against the floor. I didn't move. I couldn't. Because for the first time since she died, I wasn't alone. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, her voice played again, like an echo inside my chest. I sat on the edge of my armchair, staring at the radio as if it were some kind of portal between this world and whatever comes after. The snow outside kept falling, covering the streets of Maple Harbor with a thick white blanket. Even the wind seemed careful not to disturb that strange silence that followed her words. Peter, if you can hear me, don't be afraid. Afraid. That was exactly what I was. But not of ghosts or miracles. I was afraid that my mind had finally cracked under the weight of grief. I had spent months pretending to live, going through motions, drinking coffee I couldn't taste, fixing things no one asked me to. Maybe hearing her voice was just my loneliness taking a new shape. Still, a part of me didn't care whether it was madness or magic. Because for a few seconds, it felt like she was there. I reached for the radio again. My hands trembled as I turned the dial back, hoping, begging for something, a sound, a whisper, her laugh. Nothing. Only the empty hum of static. The small red light flickered, then went out completely. I exhaled and leaned back, letting the silence swallow me. The truth is, Stacy always believed there was more beyond what we could see. I used to tease her for it. You and your miracles, I'd say, and she'd just smile, brushing flour off her apron, answering, maybe one day you'll believe, too. I smiled bitterly at the memory. The house still smelled faintly like cinnamon, the way she used to make it at Christmas: cinnamon tea, cinnamon candles, cinnamon cookies. It was everywhere, haunting and comforting all at once. I walked to the fireplace and added another log. The flame came alive with a hiss, lighting up her photo again. "If this is your way of talking to me, Stacy," I whispered, "I'm listening." Morning came slowly. The first light crept through the curtains like it didn't want to disturb me. I hadn't slept, but I didn't feel tired either. There was something heavy, yes, but also a strange calmness, as if the world had tilted slightly, and for the first time in months, I wasn't standing in complete darkness. After breakfast, I went down to the basement. It smelled of dust and oil, and the old wooden shelves still held pieces of my life: broken radios, tangled wires, photos I hadn't looked at in years. That's where I found it, an old cardboard box marked Christmas. I hadn't opened it since the funeral. Inside were ornaments, a few greeting cards, and the red scarf she knitted for me our first winter together. I lifted it to my face. It still carried her scent, faint but alive. My throat tightened. At the bottom of the box was something else, a small, wrapped package, tied with silver ribbon. My name was written in her handwriting, to Peter. "Don't open until Christmas." I froze. I remembered this. It was from last year. I never opened it. The night she died, I had placed it in that box and told myself I couldn't bear to see what was inside. But now, holding it again, I felt something shift inside me, like her voice had led me to it. My fingers brushed the ribbon, hesitant, trembling. Then I stopped. Instead, I carried the box upstairs, setting it gently on the table beside the radio. The snow outside had turned to freezing rain, tapping softly against the window. I turned the radio knob once more, static. I sighed. Maybe it had been a dream. Maybe grief really was playing tricks on me. That's when I heard a knock at the door. It startled me. No one ever visited on Christmas morning. I walked slowly toward it, half expecting no one to be there. When I opened it, Giselle stood on the porch, wrapped in her oversized coat, holding a small basket of bread and oranges. "Merry Christmas, Peter," she said softly. "I thought you could use some company." I forced a smile. "You shouldn't have walked in this weather." She shrugged. "The road needed my footprints." Then she looked past me, toward the radio on the table. "You still keep that old thing?" "Yeah," I answered. "It talked to me last night." Her brow furrowed, but she didn't laugh. Giselle had seen enough loss in her life not to judge another man's ghosts. She stepped inside, shaking the snow from her boots. "Well," she said, "if the dead are calling, at least they picked a good time of year." We sat for a while in silence. The bread was warm, the tea was hot, and for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid to speak her name out loud. Giselle listened as I told her what I'd heard. When I finished, she looked at me with eyes that seemed older than both of us. "Maybe it wasn't the radio, Peter. Maybe it was just your heart remembering how to listen." After she left, I sat again in front of the fire. The snow had stopped. The world outside was pure white, untouched. I looked at the small wrapped gift on the table, and this time, I didn't look away. That night, before going to bed, I whispered into the quiet room, "Stacy, if you really are here, tell me what to do." And maybe it was the wind, or maybe it wasn't, but I swear I heard it again, faint, like a sigh drifting through static. "Tomorrow, Peter. Open it tomorrow." The morning came wrapped in silence. A soft kind of silence, the one that feels almost sacred, like the world is holding its breath. Light spilled through the curtains, touching every corner of the room, and for a second, I could almost believe she was there. I could almost hear Stacy humming from the kitchen, singing to herself as she used to, off-key but beautiful. But then the house reminded me it was empty. The clock ticked. The kettle whistled. And the memory faded like breath on glass. I sat by the table, staring at the small gift still sitting beside the radio. The silver ribbon looked dull in the daylight, but her handwriting, soft and round, still glowed with life. To Peter. Don't open until Christmas. Well, I whispered, it's Christmas. My hands hesitated. The sound of the paper tearing felt too loud, too real. Inside, I found a small cassette tape and a folded note. The tape had her handwriting again, for when you miss me the most. My throat tightened. I reached for the old tape recorder that had been sitting under a pile of newspapers. I hadn't used it in years. My fingers shook as I pressed play. There was a crackle first, the sound of time itself waking up, and then, her voice. Hey, love, Stacy said softly. If you're hearing this, it means I'm gone. But don't look so sad, please. I just wanted to leave you something to hold on to. I froze, every nerve burning. Her laugh followed, the gentle laugh I'd forgotten the sound of. You know, you never liked when I recorded myself. You said it made me sound too serious. But I wanted you to know, you were my favorite story. Every single day. My vision blurred. She paused on the tape, as if collecting her breath. If you're sitting there alone, Peter, please, don't stay angry. Not at the world, not at me, not at Jordan. You two have the same stubborn heart, but you need to forgive him. That's my Christmas wish. Promise me you'll try. The tape clicked off. I stared at the recorder, unable to breathe. The silence afterward was unbearable, like the whole world had stopped waiting for my answer. Jordan. My son. The name itself felt heavy. We hadn't spoken since the night of her funeral. Harsh words, things that can't be taken back. I told him he was selfish for leaving her side when she needed him most. He told me I never understood him. We were both right and both wrong. And now, Stacy was asking me to reopen that wound. I replayed the tape. Her voice filled the room again, softer now, almost whispering, I hope you're sitting by the fire, listening to the snow. Remember the first Christmas we had here? You burned the turkey, and we had cereal for dinner. You said it was the best Christmas you ever had. I did too. Because you were there. That's all that ever mattered to me. I pressed stop. Tears blurred everything. My hands covered my face, and for the first time since the funeral, I let myself cry without shame. Hours passed. The snow outside had stopped, leaving the air crisp and bright. I walked out to the porch, holding the tape in my hand. Across the street, Giselle was shoveling her driveway. She looked up and waved. I waved back. She came over, her cheeks red from the cold. You look like you've seen a ghost, she said gently. Maybe I have, I answered. We sat on the porch steps for a while, not saying much. She told me about her late husband, how sometimes she still talks to him when the wind blows through the trees. It's funny, she said, we think they're gone, but love doesn't leave with the body, Peter. It lingers. Sometimes it even borrows a voice. Her words sank into me like snow melting on skin. Maybe Stacy's voice wasn't a haunting. Maybe it was a reminder, a thread connecting what was left of us. That evening, I went back inside. The tape was still on the table. I stared at it for a long time before picking up the phone. The number was still the same, Jordan's number. My finger hovered over the last digit, but I couldn't do it. Not yet. The fear of silence on the other end was stronger than the guilt. Instead, I sat by the fire again and turned on the radio. The hum returned, soft, distant. I closed my eyes, letting it fill the space. And then, faint but unmistakable, her voice again. "Peter," it said. "You're doing fine." I jolted upright. "Stacy?" Static. Then nothing. My heart pounded. I turned every knob, searching for that frequency again. "Stacy, please," I whispered, "say something." No reply, just the soft hiss of white noise. And yet, I could swear the static itself began to form a rhythm. A melody. The same melody she used to hum while cooking. I listened, my whole body trembling. It was her. Somehow, it was her. The fire crackled. The room glowed warm, but my hands were cold. I felt the ache of longing and peace colliding inside me. For the first time, I realized something simple: maybe love is the only signal that never fades, no matter how much static life throws in between. And as the last ember of fire died, I whispered into the dark, "Merry Christmas, Stacy." For a moment, just a heartbeat, I thought I heard her answer back. I spent most of that night sitting in the dim light of the fire, staring at the old radio as if it were breathing. The snow had started again, thin flakes falling past the window like bits of ash. I couldn't tell if the sound I'd heard earlier had been real, or only the echo of my own longing. Either way, I wasn't ready to turn the radio off. There was a strange comfort in the hum, the kind of sound that keeps you company without asking questions. By dawn the fire had burned down to embers. I made coffee, black and bitter, and carried the cup to the table where the tape and the gift wrapping still lay. The house smelled like smoke and cold air. I replayed Stacy's message once more, softer this time, letting every word settle where silence had been living. "Don't stay angry, forgive him." The phrase looped inside my head until it felt less like instruction and more like heartbeat. I finally picked up the phone. I dialed Jordan's number halfway before hanging up again. The distance between us wasn't measured in miles but in pride. I told myself I'd try later, after breakfast, after the snow stopped, after I could find the right words. But the truth was I didn't know how to begin. How do you call your own son after years of silence and say, "I'm sorry"? The radio clicked suddenly, a spark of static cutting through the quiet. The volume knob moved a fraction on its own, or maybe my eyes only imagined it. A burst of white noise filled the room, then a woman's voice, faint and breaking. "Christmas Eve, 1986, live from Maple Harbor Community Radio." It was an old broadcast, one of Stacy's first shows. She used to host a Christmas segment once a year, reading letters from listeners and dedicating songs. I remembered sitting by that same radio decades ago, listening to her speak to the whole town with the same warmth she used at home. Hearing her again now felt like opening a time capsule that still smelled of cinnamon and pine. Her younger voice laughed through the static. "And to my husband, Peter, who's probably fixing something in the garage right now, don't forget to come eat before the turkey burns." I laughed and cried at once. The past had broken through, clear and alive, playing itself just for me. I turned up the volume. The broadcast continued, the tape looped, and then new words, ones I'd never heard in that recording before. "If you're hearing this someday, it means love outlived me. It means you kept listening." My breath caught. She had hidden a message inside an old radio show. A secret frequency meant only for me. I whispered, "I'm listening, Stacy. I'm still listening." All day I searched the house for more tapes, more clues. I found receipts from the radio station, her handwritten notes on paper that had yellowed at the edges. Each one carried the same handwriting that felt like a hand reaching through time. On one slip of paper she had written, "Sometimes hearts have their own frequencies. You just have to tune in." That evening, Giselle stopped by again with soup and a stubborn smile. She noticed the mess of tapes on my table. "So," she said, "your house is a radio station now?" "Something like that," I replied. "She's still talking to me." Giselle nodded, no disbelief in her eyes. "Then listen carefully. The dead don't waste words." After she left, I sat by the fire once more. I pressed record on the empty cassette and spoke into the small microphone. My voice cracked, but I didn't stop. "Stacy, if you can really hear me, thank you. I'll try to do what you asked. I'll call him. I promise." The snow thickened outside, turning the world quiet again. I felt tired, but not the heavy kind of tired that comes from loss. It was the calm that comes when you finally decide to move towards something, even if you're still afraid. Before going to bed, I placed the tape beside the others and whispered, "Good night, love." But sleep didn't come easily. Around midnight, I woke to the sound of faint music. The radio had turned itself on again, playing a lullaby Stacy used to hum when Jordan was little. The melody filled the room, gentle and slow, wrapping around me like a blanket. Then, beneath the music, I heard her whisper, barely audible, "Tomorrow, Peter. It's time." The next morning, I didn't hesitate. I dialed Jordan's number all the way through. It rang 5 times before a groggy voice answered. "Dad?" I froze. Years collapsed into that single word. I swallowed hard. "Yeah, it's me." Silence. I could hear him breathing. What made you call?" he asked. "I heard your mother's voice," I said simply. "And she told me to." He didn't speak for a long time, but when he finally did, his voice was trembling. "It's Christmas, Dad." "I know," I whispered. "That's why." Neither of us said I'm sorry. We didn't need to. The line itself became the apology we'd both been too proud to make. When we hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone, listening to the snow fall again. And for the first time in years, the house didn't feel empty. It felt expected, alive with the hum of connection, faint but real. That night, I turned off the radio and looked at her photo on the mantel. "You were right," I said softly. "Miracles do happen, sometimes they sound like static." And somewhere, deep inside that quiet, I thought I heard her laugh, warm, distant, and full of love. After I hung up the phone that morning, something changed in the air of the house. It wasn't something I could name, not exactly, but the silence had shifted, softened maybe, like it had less weight behind it. I walked through each room like I hadn't been there in years, even though I hadn't left in days. The kitchen still smelled faintly of old spices, the kind Stacy used to grind herself, and I stood there for a long time remembering how she would sing while stirring her sauces, swaying her hips gently, humming some half-remembered tune from her childhood. I looked at the chair where she used to sit, and it hit me all over again that I would never see her there, never hear the rustle of her sleeve against the tablecloth, never smell the warmth of her skin after a shower. But the house, somehow, was less hollow than before, as if the walls themselves had begun to breathe again. I went back to the tape recorder, and I pressed play again, needing to hear her voice just one more time. It filled the room like it had before, soft and confident, and this time I closed my eyes and let it wash over me completely. I didn't analyze it, I didn't try to explain it, I just let her speak. And when the message ended, I didn't feel the same crushing grief I had felt before. I felt something else. Direction, maybe. A sense that there was still something left for me to do. I found myself back in the attic, digging through boxes I hadn't touched in years, and that's when I found the old photo albums, the ones we had started but never finished. I sat on the floor with them spread around me like maps of another life. There were photos of Jordan when he was small, Stacy holding him in the snow, me in the background pretending not to pose, the three of us inside that golden frame of a moment we thought would last forever. I flipped through them with careful hands, as if they might break, and each page felt like a doorway to a place I could never walk into again. And then, near the back of the last album, I found a letter I didn't remember. It was in Stacy's handwriting, folded twice, tucked between the pages. The ink was slightly faded, but the message was clear. It was addressed to me and dated just a week before she died. She wrote that she knew she was leaving, that her body had grown tired and she could feel it deep in her bones. She wrote about love, about the little moments we had stopped noticing, about how she had forgiven me for all the things I never said and hoped I would forgive myself too. She said she had recorded more than one message, hidden them in places she knew I'd eventually find. She believed that I would need time, that grief would lock me up at first, but that eventually I would begin to listen again. And then, at the bottom of the letter, she wrote something that nearly stopped my heart. She said she had recorded one final message, a truth she had never shared with me, something she was afraid would hurt but believed I deserved to know. It was hidden behind the panel in the back of the old radio, the one we had bought together the first year of our marriage, the one I had fixed 100 times but never really looked inside. I ran back downstairs, hands shaking. I pulled the radio off the table and turned it around, unscrewing the back slowly, terrified of what I might find. Tucked just inside was a small cassette, unlabeled, wrapped in a piece of cloth that had once been part of her favorite dress. My breath caught as I placed it in the recorder and pressed play. Her voice came again, softer this time, almost hesitant. She spoke about the year Jordan turned 17, about the night he had come home late and the fight we had, the things I said, the things she wished I hadn't. And then she spoke of a secret she had kept from me all these years. That Jordan had come to her one night, broken, ashamed, carrying the weight of something he couldn't name. That he had told her about his fears, his doubts, how he felt like he was never good enough for me. And Stacy had promised not to tell me, afraid that I would see him differently, that I would be disappointed. But she regretted that promise now. She said that what he needed then was my arms, my understanding, not silence. And that her greatest sorrow was not being able to mend that distance before she left. I sat there, holding the tape, my whole body numb. All these years I had believed he had turned away from us, from her. But the truth was that I had turned away from him, too proud to see the boy behind the anger, too wrapped in my own idea of fatherhood to realize that what he needed was not correction but connection. I thought of all the Christmases we had spent apart, all the calls I never made, all the times I could have said something and didn't. And for the first time, I didn't cry. I just sat there, stunned by the weight of it all, feeling the old radio's warmth against my hand, like it had been waiting this whole time for me to hear the truth. As the fire burned low and the snow continued to fall outside, I knew that this story between us wasn't finished. Stacy had given me more than memories. She had left a map back to something I thought I'd lost forever. Forgiveness wasn't just a word anymore. It was a door, and it was open. The day after I heard that final message, I didn't speak to anyone, didn't open the curtains, didn't touch my tools or the tapes or the firewood. I just sat there, feeling the heaviness of years settling on my shoulders like frost on a windowpane. I kept thinking about Jordan, about that 17-year-old boy I didn't understand, about all the ways I had failed him without even knowing I had. I remembered his silence at the dinner table, the way he used to glance at me like he was waiting for something I never gave him. I thought I was raising a man by being hard when what he needed was to be seen, not judged. Stacy saw it, of course she did. She always had a way of hearing what wasn't said. And now, even from the other side of time, she was still doing it, still trying to mend what was broken between us. She had carried that secret to protect us both, but now that I knew, there was no going back. Her last request wasn't a wish, it was a command wrapped in love, and I couldn't let her down again. I sat at the kitchen table, an old notepad in front of me, the kind we used to keep by the phone to jot down grocery lists or reminders to call the plumber. I tore off a clean sheet and began writing. The words came slow at first, stiff, like muscles long and used, but then they poured out. I wrote to Jordan, not as a father who had all the answers, but as a man who had run out of excuses. I told him what I found, what his mother had left behind, and how deeply I regretted not being the man he needed. I told him I had listened to every message she left me, and each one led me closer to the truth I'd been too proud to face. I didn't ask for forgiveness, I didn't expect anything in return, I just told him the truth. That I missed him. That I loved him. That the house was quiet without the sound of his voice. And that this Christmas, all I wanted was for him to remember that, even when I failed to show it, he was always enough. When I finished, I folded the letter carefully, placed it in an envelope, and stared at it for what felt like hours before finally walking through the snow to the post box at the end of the street. My fingers trembled as I let it fall in. That sound, that soft thud of paper hitting metal, was the bravest sound I'd made in years. I walked home slowly, letting the cold bite at my cheeks, letting the weight of the letter lift from my chest. The house greeted me with its usual silence, but something had changed. The radio was humming again, faint but steady, like a breath. I sat down, listening, hoping, wondering if I'd hear her voice again. But this time, there was only music. A soft instrumental version of our favorite song, the one Stacy used to play on the piano when the nights were long and we were too tired to speak. I closed my eyes and let it fill the space between the walls, between the years, between me and the man I used to be. That night I didn't dream of her. I didn't need to. She was everywhere. In the way the tea tasted warmer, in the way the snow fell slower, in the sound of the creaking floorboards as I walked through the hallway. Her presence wasn't something I reached for anymore. It was just there, like gravity. The next morning, I got up early, made coffee, and waited. I wasn't sure for what, but something inside me felt expectant. As if the world had started spinning in the right direction again. Around noon, the phone rang. I stared at it, heart pounding, hands frozen mid-air. When I finally picked up, there was a long pause before I heard his voice. It was deeper now, steadier, but still held something familiar, something that belonged to the boy who used to ask me about stars and engines. He said he got the letter. He said he'd read it 3 times before deciding to call. And then he said he was coming. Not just soon, not next week, but today. He was already on the road. I didn't know what to say. I just stood there with the phone pressed to my ear, stunned by the sound of hope taking shape. After we hung up, I looked around the house and saw everything with new eyes. The dust didn't matter, the unwashed dishes didn't matter. What mattered was that I had reached out, and my son was reaching back. I lit the fire, opened the curtains, and watched the snow fall like forgiveness from the sky. Giselle came by later with another basket, smiling like she already knew. I didn't tell her anything. I didn't need to. She just touched my shoulder gently and left, letting the silence between us say everything. I sat by the fire again, radio playing low, and stared at the driveway, waiting for the sound of tires on gravel. Stacy had given me a miracle, but not the kind with angels or glowing lights. She gave me something harder, something real. She gave me the chance to fix what I had broken, the courage to speak what I had left unsaid, and the grace to believe that even in the silence, love was still listening. And that, maybe, was the truest kind of Christmas gift there ever was. As a child, I used to think nights were heavier in December, like the dark settled more deeply into the skin of the house. But that night, as I waited for Jordan, the weight felt different, not oppressive but full, like the world was holding its breath with me. I had spent so many years filling Christmas Eve with excuses, with silence, with the sound of my own regret echoing off the walls. Now, I had only the ticking of the clock, the steady crackle of the fire, and the growing beat of my own heartbeat as the minutes passed and the snow kept falling. I checked the window every few minutes, like a child waiting for something he's not sure he deserves, and when I finally saw the headlights turn into the driveway, it was as if time itself exhaled. I didn't move at first. I just watched the car slow to a stop, the engine shutting off, the door opening. Jordan stepped out into the snow, taller than I remembered, broader in the shoulders, but still carrying that same posture of hesitation. He stood by the car for a moment, his eyes scanning the house, and in that single moment I saw all the years between us, all the holidays missed, the calls avoided, the pain pressed down beneath the surface. But I also saw something else. I saw the boy I once carried on my shoulders, the boy who used to leave hand-drawn cards on my workbench, the boy who once believed I could fix anything, even the world. I opened the door slowly, not knowing what to say, and when our eyes met, there was no grand speech, no dramatic scene. Just a nod. Just two men, father and son, standing at the edge of something they'd both been too afraid to cross. He stepped inside and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The house felt warmer with him in it, not just from the fire but from the way it breathed differently, like it had been waiting too. I led him to the living room, where the fire glowed low and steady, and we sat in silence. I offered him tea, and he accepted. That simple exchange carried more weight than all the words I had rehearsed in my head for years. The radio was still on, humming softly with no station in particular, just that low comforting sound that had become the soundtrack of this strange, beautiful unraveling. And then, without touching the dial, it changed. A song came through, one neither of us had heard in years, the lullaby Stacy used to hum when Jordan was a baby. He looked at the radio, then at me, his eyes glistening with something I hadn't seen in a long time. He asked me if I had done something to make it play. I shook my head. He didn't ask again. We sat for a long time with that song between us. He told me he had read the letter twice on the side of the highway, pulled over because he couldn't see through his tears. He told me he hadn't known how much he needed to hear those words, how long he had waited for them without knowing it. I listened. I didn't interrupt. I let his voice pour out all the years we had missed, and when he finally fell silent, I said what I should have said long ago. I told him I was sorry. For everything. For the way I had mistaken silence for strength. For the way I had expected him to carry burdens I never helped him unpack. For the time we lost. He didn't say anything right away. But he reached into his coat and pulled out a small box. He handed it to me. I unwrapped it slowly, unsure of what it could be, and inside was a small piece of stained glass, blue and green and gold, in the shape of a pine tree. He said Stacy had made it years ago, and he had found it in her old piano bench. He had held on to it, unsure of what to do with it, until now. It shimmered in the firelight, catching the glow like a frozen star. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I just held it in my hand, feeling its warmth despite the cold glass. The radio began to hiss again, static rising gently as the song faded. And then, just as before, her voice came through, soft, like a breath. She said our names. Not much else. Just our names. But it was enough. We both looked at each other, not startled, not afraid, just completely still. And in that moment, something closed gently inside both of us, not like a door slamming shut, but like a wound finally healing from the inside out. Later that night, after Jordan had gone to the guest room, I sat alone by the fire. The radio had gone silent, and I didn't try to turn it back on. I didn't need to. She had said what needed to be said. The rest was ours to carry forward. I looked at the stained glass tree on the mantel, beside her photo, and felt something I hadn't felt in years, peace, not because everything was fixed, but because something had been forgiven. The house was quiet again, but not empty. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, the light stayed on. The morning after Jordan arrived felt different in a way I couldn't quite name, like the house had finally exhaled after holding its breath for too many winters. The quiet wasn't so sharp anymore, it was warm, almost tender, like the silence of a forest after fresh snow. I got up early and made coffee for two out of habit, but this time I actually had someone to share it with. I set 2 mugs on the table, and when he walked into the kitchen, his hair still messy from sleep and his eyes carrying the softness of someone who had cried quietly in the night, he smiled like he used to when he was little, just a slight curve of the mouth that said more than words ever could. We didn't speak much that morning, and we didn't need to. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't arrive with trumpet blasts or grand declarations, sometimes it's just 2 hands brushing against each other when reaching for the sugar, or the way someone passes you the spoon without needing to be asked. Later that day we took a walk down to the lake, the one Stacy used to love, frozen now under a layer of snow that stretched endlessly in every direction. I hadn't been there in years. The wind was sharp, cutting through the scarves and coats, but I didn't feel cold. We walked side by side, not like strangers anymore, not like men measuring their words, but like father and son, both learning how to speak again without speaking. When we reached the edge of the dock, Jordan stopped and looked out across the ice, his breath visible in the air like wisps of memory. He said he used to come here after school when he didn't know how to talk to me, and I felt something inside me crack open all over again. I wanted to say I was sorry again, 100 more times, but instead I just stood there with him, letting the silence say it for me. That night we lit candles in the living room and pulled out old photo albums. The ones I had found but hadn't dared to open until now. We sat side by side on the floor, and with each photo turned, it felt like we were piecing together a puzzle we had both forgotten how to complete. There was Stacy in every frame, her smile like sunlight, her arms always wrapped around one of us, her eyes telling us we were enough even when we didn't believe it. We laughed at old clothes and awkward haircuts, and when we reached the last page, we both sat quietly for a long time. I looked at him and saw more of her than I ever had before. Not just in his face, but in the way he carried pain, in the way he loved silently, fully, even after everything. That night, when he went to bed, he paused at the door and looked back at me, and though he didn't say a word, I saw it in his eyes. He had come home, not just to the house, but to us. After he went to bed, I sat again by the fire, and for the first time, I let myself remember everything without trying to run from it. I remembered our first Christmas here, the smell of burnt cookies and the laughter echoing through these same walls, the way Stacy used to dance with Jordan in the hallway wearing reindeer slippers, her voice singing off-key carols until we begged her to stop. I remembered the year we lost the tree to a power outage and ended up decorating a broom with paper stars, and how she said it was the best tree we ever had. I remembered the quiet fights, the reconciliations, the mornings when we were too tired to speak but still reached for each other's hands. I remembered it all, and none of it hurt the way it used to. Because she wasn't gone, not really. She was in every corner of this house, in every strand of memory that Jordan and I shared, in every note of every song the radio dared to play when we needed it most. And then, just as I was about to head to bed, the radio flickered to life again. I didn't move. I didn't reach for it. I just sat there and listened. The static came first, soft and almost shy, then a swell of music, and then her voice, just once more, so faint I almost thought I imagined it. She said my name, then Jordan's, and then she said thank you. That was all. Just thank you. But those two words wrapped around me like the warmest blanket, and I knew in my bones that this was her goodbye. Not a vanishing, not a loss, but a release. She had brought us back together. She had done what love does when we let it. It rebuilds. It redeems. The flame in the fireplace dimmed. The snow outside had stopped falling, the sky clear, the stars sharp and unblinking above Maple Harbor. I sat alone in the glow of the coals, but I didn't feel alone. I felt whole. And when I finally stood and turned off the radio, I knew it wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning of something beautiful. The next morning I woke up before the sun, not because something startled me, but because I wanted to. For the first time in years, I didn't dread the stillness of Christmas morning. I sat on the edge of the bed for a while, letting the soft light of dawn ease its way through the curtains, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the quiet didn't hurt. It held me. It welcomed me. I stepped out into the hallway, and before I reached the stairs, I heard soft movement in the kitchen. The smell of coffee drifted up with the gentle sound of clinking cups, and I knew Jordan was already awake. I smiled without thinking. Something in the air felt new. We ate breakfast without many words. It wasn't uncomfortable, it was full, like our silence had learned to carry things words couldn't. He said he was thinking of visiting more often. I nodded, swallowing the gratitude that climbed into my throat too quickly. We exchanged small gifts, but the truth was, everything we needed had already been given. The tree in the corner sparkled with soft white lights, and I found myself staring at the little stained glass pine he had given me the night before. It hung from a branch, catching the morning light, casting flickers of color across the living room. I realized then how little it took to feel whole again. Not miracles with trumpets and gold, but quiet moments full of meaning. I walked out onto the porch while he took a call, and the cold kissed my face gently, not harsh like before. The town was still, the snow resting like a soft blanket over everything. I looked down the street and thought about all the Christmases I had spent in this house, how many of them I had wasted thinking love was something proven through presence and work and responsibility, when all Stacy ever asked of me was attention, listening, softness. I think now, she knew I would only learn after she was gone. And maybe that's why she left me those messages. Maybe she knew that her voice would carry more weight in the absence. Maybe that's the cruel mercy of love, it teaches us most through what it leaves behind. Back inside, I found myself walking into the den where the radio sat, now silent. I didn't turn it on. I didn't need to. Its job was done. Stacy's voice had become something I carried now, not something I searched for in the static. I sat beside it, placed a hand gently on its side, and whispered thank you. For everything. For the patience. For the forgiveness. For giving me one more Christmas to remember how to be a father. I think that's what Christmas is, when you strip away the ribbons and the noise. It's remembering. It's returning. It's realizing that the only thing more powerful than time is love, because it's the one thing that survives the silence. Later, Jordan and I sat by the fire, and for the first time in years, I saw my reflection in his eyes, not as a man who had failed, but as one who had finally shown up. I told him stories about Stacy he didn't know, small things, like how she used to sing to the tomato plants to help them grow, or how she always cried at the same scene in her favorite Christmas movie, even when she knew it was coming. He laughed quietly, and I could see her in the curve of his smile, in the gentleness of his listening. We didn't speak of grief. We didn't need to. What filled the room wasn't loss. It was presence. Hers. Hours. The house had never felt more full. That night, I stood in the doorway of his old room before I went to bed. He was asleep, the kind of sleep that only comes when something that was broken finally mends. I walked back to my room, turned off the light, and laid in the stillness. And before I drifted off, I whispered into the dark, not expecting an answer, but offering one anyway. I told her I had kept my promise. That we had found our way back. That she was right all along. And in the deep, unmoving quiet that followed, I didn't hear her voice. I didn't need to. I felt her. In the breath I took, in the peace that settled over my chest, in the warmth that touched the room despite the cold outside. This is the sound of Christmas. Not bells or choirs or grand declarations. It's the sound of a heart finally open. The sound of a letter read and understood. The sound of a father and son sitting side by side without needing to fix anything. The sound of forgiveness passing between the living and the gone. The sound of love choosing to stay. And as the snow fell once again on Maple Harbor, I closed my eyes and let it cover everything that once hurt, everything that was once unfinished. Stacy was gone, but she left the most important part of herself behind. And I, Peter Callahan, was finally listening.